Yo guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel, or welcome if you've never been here before. So I've just jumped on today to do my weekly Forex forecast, and this will be the forecast commencing the 18th of July. And apologies for last week guys, I wasn't able to get a forecast out. I did have some personal commitments that again I couldn't get out of, but I've got it here this week and I should be able to get it out for you guys most weeks in the future. So guys, before I do get started with my forecast, I will just quickly draw your attention to the written version of this forecast, and the written version of this forecast will be linked in the description so you guys can reference that if you're interested. Alright, so let's get started. So starting with Nzdusd, for me, clearly, overall, we're in a downtrend. So on the daily time frame, that gives us a bearish bias. Now, in terms of the actual rule-based structure, what we've got is this move here, so this impulsive leg here, which caused the second to last boss, and then we've got this move here, which caused the most recent boss. So for me, overall, we are in a sell situation until we break this high here. Obviously, if we see a transition on the lower time frames, then we could look for counter trend. But in terms of the daily trend, it's going to be bearish for me until we see this area here broken. Now, that said, considering how much distance it is away from here, I'm not really going to focus on this area this week. And until we see this high broken, what's really important is just what's going on down here. So for me, down here, what we've seen on the daily is we've seen this low broken, and then when we trace back, where was this low actually broken from? The last solidified high was there because that candle broke above the previous body, the previous wick. So what that means to me is that this is where our institutional order block for sells is, which caused this actual bearish move. Now, obviously we've got imbalance here, so that is why I've used this candle as the refinement for the order block. So for me, on the daily perspective only, in terms of where to look to continue the sales from, I do think that looking to continue sales out of here is what's going to make the more sense, and then we can expect that we will make a new daily low down here. So in terms of just the daily alone, what I'm going to be looking at going into this week is that price will retrace 130 pips up into this area here, and then we'll start to see the sell volume coming in, start to see the low time frame entry patterns, and we can sell following that to then take us into new lows coming away from this daily high here. So that will be the institutions bringing price back up here to mitigate their orders, and then just continuing with the bearish order flow that they've built up already. Now, that said, it is also worth being aware of the 4 hour because, as we know, 4 hour can have huge impacts on price. So, on the 4 hour, we've had this break structure here and then more recently this one. So, for me, in terms of the 4 hour structure, we're in a bearish structure until we see this invalidation point broken here. So if this is broken, then we're no longer in a strictly bearish structure on the 4 hour, and then at that point I will definitely be expecting price to come back up into this area. Now, until we see this sell invalidation broken, it is completely plausible that price can just continue to react out of this order block here on the 4 hour and then just continue the bearish structure in that way and just continuing away from the 4 hour and not coming back up here. So if you guys think that that's what's happening and if you see your entry models coming out of this area, then I don't think there's anything wrong with taking sales out of here because we could just see that continued sell move and we won't see price come back up here, or at least not yet. So for me, that's pretty much what I'm interested in on the Nzdusd this week. So the first thing to look at, if we do start seeing a trend transition on the lower time frame coming out of this area, then I think that it's okay to enter sells there to then target this low. But more ideally, we will see this sell invalidation broken, and then we can get back up into this area here, clear any imbalance, take out all this liquidity, and then we can go from there following the daily structure. And I'll anticipate that we will make a new low and bring us into the recent lowest lows on Nzdusd. So that is Nzdusd this week for me, guys. Hopefully that was clear. If not, do just leave a comment with any queries about that. So let's move on to AUDUSD. Alright, so AUDUSD, we're again in a bearish bias. Now for me, on the daily, as you guys might know, I only use the last two breaks of structure that I'm really interested in. So we had our second to last break of structure, broke this low here. That originated from this candle here, and more specifically, this wick. Now, the more recent break structure was this one here, and that originated from this candle here, this bullish candle. So for me, the whole sell structure is from up here. So until we see that area broken, we are in a bearish bias on AUD/USD. Now, if we do see this sell thesis invalidation broken above, then at that point, I won't consider it in a sell structure anymore. But until that point, I am just very bearish on AUD. So with that said, looking at where can we continue the sells out of, I think the two places that make sense is the order blocks that cause the break of structure. So we've got this order block up here, and we've got this order block here. So for me, I'm always going to be interested in this one because that's where price is going to get to first. But I will just say if we do break above this high, then I'm still going to be interested in sells, and I will be interested in sells out of this area up here if we do break above this high. So with that said, I will just now focus on this lower area because I think that's the most relevant to price right now. So from a daily perspective, we are between the high here and then we've got our low, which is currently there. So what I'm basically expecting is price has now made the low. It's now going to come back up into the order block near the high, and then after mitigating this, we will just see that next break of structure. So that's my prediction on AUD for the daily. So when we do get into this area, I will be looking for sells, and hopefully we can get them lower time frame trend transition patterns, and then we can sell out of there. Again, if this is broken, then I think it's absolutely fine also to sell out of here once we get those low time frame trend transition patterns. So it really on AU, that's what I'm looking at. I think it's pretty clean, and on the 4 hour as well, this is the refinement. Now, the thing what I really do like about this order block here, more so than this one, is that it also lines up with the 4 hour structure. So on the 4 hour, this is actually a fully valid order block in terms of rule based as well. And also where the daily high is currently is where the 4 hour sell thesis invalidation would be. So for me, this is the ideal order block, and I would expect price to sell out of there really. Now, just being aware of what's happening on the 4 hour, since we saw that this break to the low, the next break down here, what we've actually seen now is a break structure to the high. So what that's essentially presented is a counter trend buying opportunity. So obviously, we don't know as well, will this order block hold? We don't really know if it'll hold or not. So it's always good to be open to what can happen in the opposite direction. And what I can see is that we've had a clear break structure here, which is left behind this order block with imbalance. So I think in the short term, maybe Monday or Tuesday, if we get back down here before we touch into this area, then I do think that it makes sense for us to counter trend buys, which can then take us up into this area. And then I do think that the much higher probability situation is that we will start to sell off out of this area. But of course, if this high doesn't hold, then it could be a good long entry for however far it's going to continue going upwards. So that's AUD for me this week. Overall, we're in a sell bias. Mainly, I'm looking to sell out of this daily area here. Failing that, I'm still open to sells out of here. And if you're interested in the counter trend, then for me, I think that this is the best order block to look for a counter trend. So guys, that is AUD USD. All right, let's look at the Euro USD. So Euro USD, we've only had one break bearish. So overall, just based on what's going on and the fact we've broken bearish, I'm definitely still in a bearish bias on the daily. But we only have this one area to reference. So for me, I will just be expecting that price is going to retrace at some point. Now, to be fair, what I can see is this is technically the actual order block at the extreme, and that has imbalance. So by far, that's my preference for selling from in terms of the daily structure on EU. But with that said, if we actually consider like how impulsive this was, and like this area here, it's a small correction, then we've got this huge impulse. So to be fair, it could potentially just pull back, but not pull back all this way because that is quite an extreme retracement. So what I can also see is in this area here, we've got some buying volume. So you could consider that this is the order block which actually broke structure, and then instead anticipate that price will just come up to there to mitigate instead of coming right up to this order block with imbalance here. So in terms of a daily on EU, I think it's fair to look for sells out of this area, and it's also fair to look for sells out of that area as well. And that's in terms of just following the bearish structure, and it's really about which one the institutions want to come back to mitigate before then continuing down. So for me on the daily, if we are going to expect continued sells, I would look to sell out of either this area here or this area here, and I'd look to sell that probably using the 1 hour or lower entry patterns. Now, with that said, well, what's probably more important right now is what's going on the 4 hour, because until we see a resolution of the 4 hour, then we're most likely not going to see these structures up here tapped into. So looking at a 4 hour currently, if we just take the last two breaks of structure, they're both bearish, so we know that we're in a bearish bias and a bearish trend on the 4 hour. Now, in terms of what caused these last two breaks of structure, so the last order blocks, we've got this candle up here, which is the overall sell structure invalidation on the 4 hour, and then we've also got this big candle here, and then we've got this refinement of it, which caused the most recent break. So for me, the first things I'm going to be looking at this week on the euro dollar is either firstly an immediate sell coming out of here. Now I do think this is probably the least probable, but it definitely could happen. And if we do just start to see price rejecting out of this area, we start to see that trend transition to bearish, I don't see anything wrong with selling out of this area because it is literally the most recent 4 hour order block. Now, if that does fail, obviously we will have the bullish break structure, but we're still going to be in an overall sell thesis on the 4 hour. So when we do get up into here, I do think it makes sense that we may see a sell-off, and that is also where the order flow is, because we can see that this order block here was mitigated there. So I do think that when we get up into here, it will also make sense for a sell-off. So in terms of EU, start of the week, I'm expecting price to either sell off out of here and or out of here. Now, obviously, it doesn't have to, and if it does break both of these areas, then we know why, and that's because it means that it started the high time frame retracement on the daily, and then we can expect a bullish structure, which will take us up at least into this area, in my opinion, if not into this extreme up here. So that's pretty much it for you this week. I'm just expecting to follow sells from the 4 hour. If we do see it broken, then I will reassess the situation. Potentially there'll be some counter trend buying opportunities, but we can't really predict that right now. And then on the daily, when we do get up into these areas, which I doubt it's going to be this week, unless maybe Friday it happens. But when we do get up into these areas, then that's when we can look for sells. But like I say, most likely not going to be this week when we're getting up into here. So that is EU, guys. And again, I do have a written version of the forecast. So if you guys are confused at all, then just go and reference the written version of it. Alright, so pound dollar. So pound dollar, we are like the other XXXUSD pairs. We're in a sell situation. So on the daily at the minute on pound dollar, what we've got is the most recent break structure. That came from this high here. So there's your bearish order block for this break structure, and then the break structure prior to that was also bearish, and that came from this high up here. So the overall order block could be seen as this bullish candle, but for me, I'll use the refinement here where the imbalance starts. So in terms of the daily situation, what I'm really expecting is that price is going to retrace either just into this area here next to the current high, and then we'll see a continuation. I do think that's quite likely. But then failing that, price definitely has a reason to come up into here, especially with this imbalance present, and we've also got imbalance below there as well. So I do think that it will also make sense for price to come back up into this area before then selling off from there. So in terms of the daily on GU, we've got sell opportunities coming out of here, and we've got sell opportunities coming out of here. So for me, on the daily on GU, that's what I'm really just interested in, and I would just be waiting for either sells out of there or sells out of there. Now, in terms of the 4 hour, it's worth being aware of the 4 hour. We also have this one here, so it's a bit similar to EU. To be fair, it lines up almost identically. We've got this break structure here, so that's the most recent 4 hour break and the most recent 4 hour bearish point to sell from, and then we've also got this one here. So for me, first thing that we can look at is sells out of this area, Now, for me, this is less preferable because we've got obviously these daily areas above. For me, the most preferable place to sell from is going to be this area here, and that's because that ties up with the 4-hour and the daily. So ideally, really, what I'm going to see is that we're going to break this 4-hour high, and then we can sell out of there. But guys, if you see your entry model, your entry patterns coming out of this area, then absolutely there is institutional supply in this area, which has been shown by this cause of this break structure. So if that does happen, then it makes sense to look for sells out of here. So that's pretty much GU this week. First thing is potential sells out of the 4-hour high, but for me, and more preferably, I'm expecting sells from the daily high, and I think that makes more sense. And then again, if that fails, if both of these fail to hold, then I am still bearish overall. That I will just be expecting a counter trend move to take us up into this big order block up here on the daily. Then we can sell off from there. So that is my interpretation of GU this week. Alright, so finally, pound yen. Not the cleanest pair, but I think there's two situations that could play out on pound yen this week. So overall, in terms of the break structure, we've got a break structure there, which causes that overall bullish move. Now, what that's left behind is this order block down here, which is currently unmitigated. So for me, it makes sense that price could come all the way back down here. So we do have a cause for lower prices, and I do think that if price does get down here, then we could look for buys out of there following that. Now, I doubt we're going to get down here this week at all, but it is just worth understanding the context that price is in, and we do have this bullish order block, which is very far below the current price. That said, though, in terms of what's happened more recently, we had this whole bullish move here, which left behind this bullish order block. Now, in my last forecast, what I spoke about is that we'd had this 4-hour break, which came out of the overall bullish order block. So for me, I was looking for continuations out of there, and what's actually happened is we have dipped into this wick here, and then we have seen that bullish continuation coming through. So in that sense, what's started to happen is we're seeing this now reaction from the daily order block, and then based on just the daily, I would anticipate that we are now going to see higher highs taking out liquidity and continuing the bullish trend. But with that said, and understanding that we do have calls for price to come lower as well, it's worth just being aware of what's actually happening on the 4-hour. Now, on the 4-hour, we had the most recent two breaks of structure were bearish. So on the 4-hour, we're actually in a very clear bearish trend. And above that as well, we're actually in bearish order flow because we can see that there's no real imbalance in price actually mitigated there before causing another break. Now, on top of that, what we've also got is what I'd say is a pretty clean order block here with a clear imbalance. Price has tapped into it and is now rejecting it. So despite the fact that we are overall bullish based on this, we do have very clean sell structure and we have bearish order flow as well. So for me this week, I do think that we could just see price continue to sell off now following the 4-hour structure, take out this more recent daily one, and then we can see price coming down here, and we know that we've got a reason for price to come lower to take out this daily low. So for me on GJ really, right now the most preferable opportunity is going to be the sell out of here following the 4-hour. And then in terms of buys, I'd want to see this high here, this 4-hour high broken before I'd then be interested in looking for buys. So the first thing I look at on GJ, I'll be looking for sells from here. If we do see this broken with a body close on the 4-hour, then I will evaluate the situation and look to continue the 4-hour structure looking for buys. So that's my interpretation on GJ this week, and yeah, I think we've got two opportunities. So it's basically the sell out of there, or we wait for the break of structure, and then we can look to maybe buy the retracement, for example, in somewhere like that. So that's it, guys, for this week. I hope that that's enough clarity for you guys on GJ, and I hope you got value out of the rest of the forecast. So guys, I hope you guys have a really safe trading week. Stick to your trading plans. Most importantly, stick to your risk management. And thank you very much for watching, guys. If you do enjoy these forecasts, then please do like and subscribe because I do try to get them out every week. And I'm going to have some other content coming out for you guys soon, so stay tuned. Cheers, guys.